What's up, guys? It's Coach Gaglione here. It's another edition of the Powerlifting for People podcast. We got Josh Bryant from Jailhouse Strong on the line. How you doing tonight?
Hey, thanks for having me on, John. I appreciate it.
So, if you guys need to do a little homework, we're not going to, go into, Josh's, full background, but a couple of cliff notes. I know you were like the youngest guy to bench 600 in a meet. Probably most well known for coaching Julius Maddox, among others. A lot of great benchers and power lifters, strongmen. Police, fire, military. So I appreciate you taking the time. I think we first probably met in person, maybe at one of Dan Green's meets, I think.
Or at that deal in San Diego.
Yep.
Remember that big meet?
The US Open. I know there's it's like a blur. There's like so many.
When you're there with Larry at one of those, he had a real good meet at like about 2,300 or so. His attempts look real easy. Whatever year that was.
And it's so fun. You know this better than anyone, but sometimes with the you call them I guess the fast gainers, right? The fast gainers.
Right.
They're so explosive, and sometimes like even their 100% still looks like effortless. So it's pretty impressive to see like those guys. And so definitely we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I know, I thought, you always, I have a lot of your books. I've kind of, watched some of your courses. I'm not sure if you remember the name, Greg Robbins. But Greg was someone that I kind of grew up with in the industry. I haven't spoken with him in years now, but he was someone that was kind of up and coming. I know that he was like one of your, did some coaching with you.
He's in Massachusetts.
Yep. So yeah, we had like a lot of like kind of interminglings, and then we kind of like finally met at some of these
for sure
big events, which is always cool. So so I wanted to kind of obviously get you on. We just were at an event together that you were presenting, which was great. And then we can kind of dive in and see where the conversation takes us. But I know this was kind of a police, fire, military kind of oriented seminar. What I thought was really cool about it, I'm not sure if you always, do the seminars with Eddie that way or just with yourself, but normally when I've done presentations for myself and what I've seen from a lot of folks, sometimes they do the Q&A last. You guys actually did the Q&A first, and then we did the hands-on after lunch, which I thought actually ended up working out well. So I'm not sure if that's something that you normally do, or if it just kind of like played out that way. But I just want to hear like your thoughts on like the event, and then maybe just give a quick like recap of kind of what we did, and then we can kind of dive into some specifics.
Yeah, right. So I was really glad we got to the hands-on, because I thought we were going to have some problems. I thought we would get like a couple people up there to actually like do the lifts, but it was pretty cool of them to let us like kind of do what we needed to do. But yeah, I think the Q&A first was pretty good, just to kind of loosen everybody up and make everybody feel comfortable and show that, we're going to be real laid back. It wasn't going to be, and I found it's funny. I used to do like a whole PowerPoint and all that, and I always bring it, like I was telling you, just in case if it's never been that way. But if like people weren't asking questions, we'd want to have a backup plan. You know what I mean? So like, and that's there. So the event was great. It was to raise money for reps for responders.
Yeah.
It's basically the best way to sum it up is there's a lot of mental health crisis, but not enough resources for first responders. This is a way to help them not become a statistic and empower them. Very
cool. And I'll just kind of piggyback off what you said about the Q&A and having, so, I've done a lot of speaking engagements over the years myself. Sometimes when you're at like a college or something, I'm sure you've done some stuff with universities and more kind of, different organizations. So like, your approach is going to be different for something like that. But I do think I always have like kind of a script, if you will, but like, I'm not afraid to go off the script, because sometimes you just kind of, you veer off in a different direction, and you kind of see, what are the attendees like actually need. So I thought that was great. And then for me, just being a coach, because obviously I've been involved with powerlifting since 2006. I know that you're like a couple of decades in yourself. So, I mean, sometimes like just getting like a little bit better and just like that niche thing doesn't really like serve you too well. But so for me, learning a little bit more about like what you guys do with, some of the special populations, like the first responders, like you said,
right.
And just kind of hearing like, different techniques, different approaches. I learn a lot. And one of the things that I did, so there was two things. So, I'll kind of get to our conversation in a second. But the first that I did with Eddie outside of just like the general lifts, I also like had him like watch. I'm like, hey, like, can you like watch just some kind of off the cuff things? Like, can you watch my close stance high bar squat? Can you watch my bent over row? Of course I had to have him look at my sumo deadlift because,
Yeah.
he's like really well known for that. And I've actually been kind of trying to implement a little bit of his setup into my, kind of meshing my like normal setup with his kind of little kind of wiggle that he does. So I'm just kind of trying to refine that and see what feels good, which that's another thing I'm sure we'll talk about. I think that's important, whether you're listening to a podcast or you're at an event, like actually have like practical takeaways and take action. I know you're big on taking action. So I think it was good that we got to do some stuff in person. But one of the things I thought was really cool, and I know that you don't have a ton of experience with equipped lifting,
Right.
but I brought one of my guys, Brad, there, and he was great. He learned a lot, and he's been implementing stuff as well. But we had kind of a longer conversation about programming. I'm sure we'll share some and then we also kind of like came up with this very like unique rear delt row like on the fly,
Right.
which I thought was really cool. So I wanted to maybe kind of hear your thoughts on that, and because I thought that was a really good back and forth. And obviously people, you guys won't be able to see what transpired, but I think it's definitely worth talking about, because I think that I know Swiss was this weekend and some of these big events, and sometimes they say like the best like aha moments are at lunch or like after hours, and I think that was a good example of that. So I was just kind of curious, like your kind of take.
I think one thing that like you kind of, this is on subject to what you mentioned, but not what you asked. I thought it was pretty smart of you to, and I think there's a good note of that, is have people take a look at other lifts, because I've always said that, like, hey, you want me to look at your farmer's walk, whatever you want to do, let's take a look at that and get it besides bench, squat, and deadlift. Because a lot of people in there maybe pretty dialed in there and not really wanting to change much. They might want to focus on getting stronger, but like, their bent row sucks or whatever, the upper back's weak, and then you had an opportunity there and capitalize on it. I think when you go to these things, we'll cap it like generally at 30 or so, because you want to get like enough time with people and stuff, and do your best to make sure, everybody's included and get something out of it. But I also think, as much as we can attempt to do that, you have to be a go-getter like that and ask, what you want to see, and just get and try new things to these things, because it's no insult to us if you walk away and say, hey, like whatever you showed me on squat didn't work. Okay, cool. Now it doesn't work. So just go back to what you're doing and get stronger. Or you may have an aha epiphany type of moment too. And I think you're right about that. A lot of times, those networking things are like slightly after or whatever. And I think a lot of people will go there and get out of it and just rush out or something. You probably want to hang around a little bit just to see what happens, for sure. I think at Swiss last year, that was like every sort of like connection I made and that kind of thing wasn't like at the Q&A, like, hey, let's go do this later or whatever. It was like sit in the bar room talking to people, or at lunch, like you're saying, like all that kind of stuff is where like the kind of, I guess, like extra stuff, the magic kind of happens for sure.
Yeah, I think I think it's also important if you're like at one of these events to like, go in with an open mind, but also kind of like know like where you're at. So obviously, like, not to like toot my own horn, because I think that it's always good to have a white belt mentality and just kind of, be humble and stuff. But also like, I've been competing since 2006. So like, if there's like a lot of problems with my squat, that's a problem in itself, things like that. So for me, like if I can just take like a couple of things, and I think that a lot of people, and I think you kind of brought this up really well with like some of your talks about accessory work and kind of really understanding like the risk benefit ratio and like what's the intent of the exercise. Am I trying to PR on skull crushers, or am I trying to improve my bench? So what I find, especially as in the powerlifting community, and you can speak to this, like we get so fixated on like PRing like everything that we start to kind of lose focus on, especially technique on the isolation work specifically. And I think you need to kind of like switch gears and kind of like, that was like one thing. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but in 2020, I did a bodybuilding show. So for about 10
I heard of, saw pictures. Okay.
It was cool. So I, like when we first met, I was a lot heavier. I was as heavy as 340 pounds.
Oh, really? I didn't know you got that big. Okay.
Yeah. So you were kind of probably saw me when I was on my way down, but I was shredded. I got down to 198 on stage. It was a bucket list thing. And, for me, since that became like my main, like the tricep extensions, the curls, all that cable crossovers, like those became my primary exercises. So I really wanted to kind of dive in and learn like how to do those things as well as I could. And I do think it showed up on stage. But then when I came back to powerlifting, and I've had some shoulder problems and stuff, but I noticed that like, my equipped bench press really started to take off again.
Wow.
I hit my first 600 plus, which, again, nothing, bench has always been like a struggle for me, but for me, it was a big deal to hit my first 600 competition equipped bench. And I attribute a lot of that to like a lot of the bodybuilding training that we did and kind of strengthening all the shoulder and the triceps and all that, and just kind of being more efficient on the isolation work. So I don't know if, so again, I think for me, to go into a seminar like this, and like I said, have somebody actually look and learn, because if those are going to be the things that actually build the lift, you want to do those well and pay attention to your techniques just as much as. So I don't know if you can kind of touch on maybe, especially as you kind of, start to go from a novice to an intermediate, and obviously as you become an advanced lifter, like how important is the execution and your intent on, some of those supplemental and accessory movements.
I think the more advanced you get, the more important it's going to be, because what's going to happen is if you're strong enough to really mess yourself up at that point. And I mean, if you're benching 135, you still want to do everything perfect with intention and all that, but you're probably not triceping enough to, need a radial ulnar arthroplasty a week later kind of thing. But if you're benching 600 and you got there by just doing bench press pretty much, then all of a sudden you went to 700, you start hitting all the little things and you're just going like a wild man. That's going to be pretty problematic. So I think the more advanced, I mean, you want to learn this from the get-go, but it's going to be a point where you can't make progress. And touching on your point on the bodybuilding, that's a great point. And that I sort of initially had that sort of epiphany myself with this kind of stuff, doing a lot of strongman stuff that's all I carry over too. And it's the same concept. Then eventually got into more bodybuilding and saw that as well. And I think the guy that taught me how to powerlift, the guy, my original powerlifting coach, like at 14 and stuff, he had done bodybuilding shows. So it wasn't like a lot of the stuff we did was bodybuilding, quote unquote. Right. He just didn't call it that or anything. We didn't call it like, I wasn't into bodybuilding per se at all, but I trained a lot like a bodybuilder early on without knowing that's what. Then I started to work at a gym at 16, had a lot of bodybuilders in there, and I started to say, oh, wow, there's a lot of commonalities, a lot of stuff we're already doing, and saw the crossover. It's like a good example, like you said, they did that. Let's just say you're an MMA fighter, your striking sucks. Then all of a sudden you get a wild hair to like enter the Golden Gloves boxing or something. And now all of a sudden you win it or do well. You go back to MMA, and now all of a sudden your striking's at least a formidable part of your repertoire, may become a strong suit, and you're a better fighter because of it. So I think that was sort of the brilliance of a lot of what Louis Simmons taught. Yep. Was that kind of deal of like he whether you like him or not, you have to admit that he was really good about, taking little pieces here and there and kind of putting together, kind of like Bruce Lee or anybody else would do, is like you're finding what's going to work and rolling with it. And if something doesn't work, like, so there's some body weight exercises that can help you in your off season. It doesn't mean if you're 270 pounds, you need to get to doing like muscle ups with a weighted vest. You're probably going to hurt yourself, but you could do like in your bodybuilding phases, some high rep body weight work that would get you. So there's all kinds of these different like crossover in these arts that can potentially benefit you. And you have to be open-minded to do it. But that's why, it's not to like me or you trying to sell people a service right here, but you do probably why it's good to work with a coach at some point, because that's going to be like your bullshit detector of like, okay, to like work with somebody like, oh yeah, I saw, you're putting in some body weight finishers or whatever in an off-season powerlifting phase. Like, let's get to like doing muscle ups and like, 5,000 pistol squats or something. That's a little crazy unless you want to just do that to do that, which is fine. We can go that direction, but we're no longer doing this for powerlifting. What's the end of the day? What's the intended purpose? Oh, it's to help my work capacity for powerlifting and give my joints a break and CNS a break from heavy weights. That's different than, I want to set the world record and push-ups in 12 hours or whatever you want to do.
Yeah. And I think, so there's kind of two topics I want to kind of dive into the programming stuff
for sure
in a minute. But before we do that, because I think it's a good segue before we get into the programming. So one of the conversations that we had, and again, I did kind of grow up in that kind of like early 2000s, Chuck Vogapol flame beanie. Louis Simmons was like,
yeah, for sure.
So that was just kind of how I was like entered into the sport. So although I didn't really have like the same like muscle mag bodybuilding background, I guess kind of for better or for worse, the good thing for me was, you know, a lot of what Louis taught. And when I went to visit him in Westside Barbell and learned under him, a lot of the program was kind of non-specific kind of accessory work and stuff. And some of it was a little off the wall and stuff. And we kind of figured out what worked and what didn't. But I think now one of the things that we talked about was you're having a lot of younger kids get into the sport. They have no like muscle. There's no like hypertrophy training. And they're just doing like very specific squat, bench, dead squat.
Well, let me stop you right there. So that's because I'm not sure I want to cover everything, but I don't want to interrupt my train of thought. We got my wheels spinning right there. So you're exactly right on that. And I think that's about the time period that this sort of like unfortunate turn happened is so Louis Simmons is advocating all this. Okay, cool. Everybody that's following, you know, what he's saying, actually saying is doing it. But then all of a sudden you have people that like became like, okay, well, I need to get better in my bench press shirt. So, you know, I'm just going to bench, you know, 3 singles, take 2 hours to do it. And then he's talking about after that, do lats and triceps. It was kind of his main thing in that order. So they go like 3, you know, bench for 2 hours in a shirt, 3 sets of half-ass lat pull downs, 3 sets of half-ass triceps. They don't have any muscle mass. So that was then. Now we got a similar problem. It's just manifested in a different way of like, okay, let's bench, squat, and deadlift. You know, bench, squat, and deadlift could be a great way to add muscle if you're a natural fast gainer for sure. But it's going to stop. The buck's going to stop somewhere. Like Ronnie Coleman, you got his, you know, say 800 for 2 on the squat. His legs aren't going to grow 2 inches, 3 inches if he goes to 900 for 2. Where like if you're squatting 300 and go up to 400, you could have totally different legs. But there's become a point of like, there's going to be a point of diminishing returns where it no longer is going to be for that purpose. Like, okay, cool, you want to power lift now, no, you know, because risk to benefit ratio for the bodybuilder is crazy to be if you just pushed it to craziness. And then like, you know, the thing is that sucks about a lot of this is we don't have like, it's a kind of a new, like what you're saying now with a newer crowd of only I believe you're talking about per our conversation last week or 2 weeks ago, is talk about people only doing like the main lifts. And we don't have, this is kind of a new thing. Like I imagine it's not going to pan out well with injuries, overuse, all that. But like, even like, if you look back, it was kind of odd in, if you look back like early 2000s, Powerlifting USA. So you'd have like different Russian lifters that are kind of training more that direction. And they'd be like, okay, this guy's like 22, totaled like 2,300. And he did it out of nowhere, supposedly. Then he's like, where is this guy again? Like, what happened? Like, who is this person? Like, it wasn't like, you know, Brad Gillingham, where he wins the IPF Worlds, you know, 100 times. It was like they won it once by a lot, but then where?
No, I agree.
I don't know.
I agree. I think that like, if you look at like, you know, because obviously and I'm not going to really talk too much about like tested versus untested and stuff, but obviously in its purest form, if you look at like the IPF is a good kind of place to start. At least eliminate some variables in terms of like equipment and what could be happening behind the scenes. So I'd rather like look at someone like a Jen Thompson, for example, who's still continuing to, she's still somehow like making PRs on her bench, even if they're very small, which is incredible. And I want to say she might even be close to, I know she's over 40. She might even be 50 now. And she's still like competing.
She's about 50.
Yeah. She's very, she's still competing at a high level. So I always say, like, if you want to like look at someone's like kind of longevity and like their training program, they should have at least like more than like 10 entries on like open power on open power.
Yeah.
And then, you know, spanning over the course of several years. But yeah, I think like, so I think you're starting to see like a lot of some of these lifters kind of come and go. I mean, I'm sure like even in our time since we've met and stuff, I mean, there's been some people that we know that have been like kind of, you know, they were like all the rage, all the buzz. And then like, you know, like I said, where are they now? So I think it's important. And unfortunately, when you have like those junior lifters, they're not really thinking about like the long game. But to your point, I think we kind of mentioned like if someone does want to be a flash in the pan, and maybe the very specific, very frequent training is is a good thing. But for most of our listeners and the people that I work with, we want to do this for a long time. So I think potentially, and that was like one of the things when I wanted to kind of segue into the programming talk, what I really appreciate about you as a coach is that like you may have a certain bias in how you train, but when you're working with your athletes, like all their programs are like vastly different. And same thing with me. Like I happen to like have a conjugate West Side kind of bias. I like to train with bands and chains. I like to train.
Yeah, for sure.
I like to compete equipped. But there's plenty of my lifters are on like a linear program or just on more basic training, or they might just only use straight bar because that's what some of us comes down to logistics, what the goals are, what the needs are of the person. Is this person like a dad or a mom that has limited time? I have some lifters, and I'm sure you do too, that only train like once, twice, or 3 days a week, and they still make progress. Yeah. You don't have to train 4, 5, 6 days a week. So, I think that would sometimes, because people, they're like, what kind of program do you run? And I'm like, well, it depends on what your goal is.
Someone's like, give me an example of how I'd be training us. I don't know you yet.
We got to have a conversation. So I don't know if you could
I don't know anything.
Jumping off point and speak to that a little bit, because I think a lot of people don't even realize like that's like,
well, I think that's the thing is and it's kind of weird to me that that's such a big thing. I guess maybe because the sport, there's more ego involved, maybe, or I don't know what it is, or like more aggressive personalities. But like, someone doesn't need to be training how I'm training right now necessarily. If they said, like, if someone said, hey, I always look at it as I'm providing you a service. So if you said, hey, I want to train exactly how you train, and I'd say, okay, cool, we can do that, but here's the drawback to it potentially for you. And if you're cool with that, let's do it. But just know that it is. So I always got to find out right away. I think, is this person wanting to train as optimal as possible? So that I say as possible, because I mean, if you have even a job, it's going to be difficult to be like totally optimal. But let's say, do they want to optimize their training, or is this more like, hey, a lot of people are going to be wanting 90% of the results because they want to make it fun. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm not competing. So I could probably do some things to make it more, I know I could make it more efficient, but I'm not competing. So I'd rather like just love what I'm doing, looking forward to it and all that, and get most of the results versus like, I'm going to do everything in my power and to get better at whatever and not enjoy it. Where if you're going for a world record, I think, we have to be a little more of a tough talk of like, look, if you have, like, for example, you're bodybuilding or you want a great gain mass, and we think we get the exact same training effect from a safety bar squat as we can a front squat for your quad mass, and you like love the front squat, that's fine. I mean, if all things are equal, let's do it. But like the higher level you're trying to get to, the more we have to look at the preferences. Like, are they the preferences because you're good at them? Like, oh yeah, let's do the farmer's walk, because we did in the off season, you get up to 450 pounds in each hand or something crazy. But I want to keep doing it to peak my deadlift. No, you don't. You just like doing it because you're good at it, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But like, I've had a couple people where if I tell them like, look, I want to get my overhead press, over 500. Like, yeah, you're only benching 600 though. So what the hell is the point of this? Do you want to, if you want to get your overhead press up, hey, I think I've done really well myself with that. I've done like a couple strongman things where I was in an event with not much experience at it and got up good. I'm figured out how to dial it in quickly. But at some point it didn't really help the bench. So like, give an example. My best bench at the time was 605 raw at this time. And we were doing a strongman contest, and one of the events was like an overhead press, which is a barbell. And I did like bodybuilding stuff with dumbbells, but I hadn't really done overhead pressing. Anybody I trained with, anybody that ever coached, it just never was like part of the program at any point. So, but I'd done some overhead work. So I got the first day and hit 350, which is pretty good, but not for someone that like some of that level of like, it sounds better than it is. We got to understand that's not even 60% of 600. So I've always said about 70% about the optimal level. When you start going beyond that, you're doing it to do it. So this is like 12 weeks out. So I like go like, I don't know what the word would be, like go like psycho, like obsessive on the overhead press, talk to anybody I know I think knows anything, read anything I can online, and just then use my own brain of like intuitively what should work, because it wasn't as much of a thing back then of people trying to do it. This is like 2005. So it wasn't like you could just, pull up a program online of overhead pressing and just put a few tweaks on it. It was like do it from scratch. So point being, I got to at the contest 445 pretty easily. And in training, I think it was like the third or fourth event. So I don't know. Had it been like the first event, I could have definitely been the high fours. I know I did 455 in training, and I could always do more meets than training, but I had to be smart because it's for a total at this contest. But point being, my bench press was one of the events too. And I got up 600, which I was worried about, which was not even a PR. And it did go easier than I expected. But based off training, 600 was gonna be it. Like that was a smart, aggressive call. 80 to 20, I'd get it kind of deal. And you'd think of like, okay, well, your overhead press went up that much. Okay, maybe if I'd stuck it around, 400 to 420, 430, but I kept pushing it beyond. And it wasn't like it just carried over my bench press. It didn't. So you become like, why are you doing this? And I think that's what a lot of people are missing is they get so good at certain things. And it was fun. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I was training over at lived in Tennessee at the time, Vanderbilt University. People hadn't seen anything like that. I mean, I'd get like a crowd every time I go to overhead pressing. I'd have like a random crowd around me cheering on. It was a lot of fun. And that was before, I mean, thankfully, like Instagram and stuff wasn't around to post it. You know what I mean? But I could definitely see the allure to it, but you have to admit that was not helping the powerlifting. And you find other stuff that does, like literally training the trap bar deadlift is part of that. Dude, it made my deadlift go up so much. And it was because I think the trap bar deadlift, I always say, if you program it right, it's good for the conventional deadlift if it gives you 1 to 2 inches. What the hell are you talking about? So if your ass is like you're more of a back deadlifter and you get like 1 to 2 inches of leg drive, it can be extremely helpful to that. So if like your technique's horrible and your ass should be 8 inches lower, it probably going to change the game. But if it's like just a little bit, it give you like some oomph in it. I felt because it forced, it's a more of a hybrid, if you will, of squat deadlift than a true hinge. I felt like a huge transference to that. So like, then you learn things that way of like, okay, this wasn't, I mean, to me, the trap bar deadlift was fine. I was pretty good at it, but it wasn't like the overhead pressing was like adrenaline junkie fun. Like I'd do this every day kind of thing if I could and not affect training. Where that trap bar deadlift was an event. I wasn't financially like super well off at the time or not close to that at the time. So there was a few $1,000s on the line. So this was not like, oh, let's go, have fun. This is like, no, dude, I need the money kind of thing. So made it happen. But I did notice from that, that's what you were talking about earlier about training these different things. When you do different stuff besides just power lift, I think you learn new things of like, oh, wow, that trap bar deadlift helped a lot. And since then it's helped a lot of people I've worked with that have had a similar issue on their deadlift. And by doing different stuff, you learn that. And like, just for example, I was thinking about I was do like I have a newsletter. So I was going to do another article at some point about like kind of priming exercises. That was the same thing of like just doing like jumps one day, kind of dicking around. I've noticed like just jumping, playing basketball, not even like we had like one of those like hoops with like a lower rim, and I forget, someone came over and we were having like a dunk contest and then deadlifted after. And I'm like, dude, that bar is like flying off the floor. So learn that kind of thing. So that's why I guess like, people like me, you and I are in business is because you can find all these good ideas. So now there's a problem of too much stuff. So like, we're almost like a better, more effective as like running interference, like, whoa, dude, like, I mean, yeah, the jumps work, but you don't need to go out and like, find a park and play basketball for 4 hours and then think you're to deadlift a PR, yeah, about 8 to 10, 12 jumps or something should do the trick. And then you're on to the deadlift. Not like, and so that's why I think people like us would come into play of actually like a lot of times, if anything, it's we're like stopping people from it's finding that balance of like, yes, try new stuff. I think also this comes down to an appropriate time and sequence of things of like, hey, you just say you just did a meet, and you're not going to do anything for 8 months. That would be the time to try something. Like, it's not like, hey, I saw that you're rucking with a weighted backpack. That looks fun. I want to do some conditioning. Okay, your meet's in 2.5 weeks. Let's hold off on that and give it a go after, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value. I know with myself, like, and I know you've done a lot of different stuff too. Like, I've done the bodybuilding show. I've done a couple of strongman things. I even did, I did a couple of kettlebell sport competitions. So I kind of tried a little bit of everything. And I always kind of came back to powerlifting. Just number one, I enjoyed it. Number two, like, I just felt like I'm more built for that. Like, that's just kind of like what I would naturally gravitate towards. But I know, like, for me, like, you have like a different kind of insight, like when you've tried all these different experiments, like, on yourself, and you kind of know, like, well, in this situation, like, I always found, for me, like, to your point, the overhead press, like, always seems to be like this, like, holy grail of, like, it's one of those, like, kind of things on the internet where, like, I don't know, people have like a certain feeling about it, whether they think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread or don't do it. I always found that, like, the incline press for me always had a higher transfer, even to my shirted bench, for whatever reason. So, whether it's,
that's interesting, because I've used that one more with people that don't do well with overhead pressing. And I'll say this about overhead pressing. So I said a 70% reference, but the first person I ever worked with to get over 300 kilos is a guy named Al Davis. And he had a bodybuilding background. And he, like, overhead pressing, he wanted to do it. I wanted him to do it. It just wasn't cutting the mustard. It's like,
yeah,
do 225 for someone that strong and your shoulders screaming, like it's not worth the risk. It's not worth the time investment. We can do other things. It doesn't have to be. And I think that's key right there, is knowing, like, if somebody's, like, also, in coaching, another value is knowing alternatives that are not that are effective. Like, so I always tell people, no matter what the goal is, especially if it's not powerlifting. So let's just go, I know we're trying to stick more powerlifting, but, like, let's just say we talk about the tactical athletes. Sure. They may not ever have to squat with a straight bar their entire career. Like,
it's a really
for whatever reason, it doesn't cause me problems. I can get under a straight bar anytime and just do it. It doesn't hurt or anything. But I know Fred Hatfield's told me he got his rotator cuff surgery because of squats, not deadlifts. But I never had a crazy low bar, like some people do. But a lot of people, the straight bar just does. Maybe it's because my arms aren't super long and I can kind of get in there. But a lot of people don't do well with even a high bar straight bar. So, like, if you're a tactical athlete, say, or a regular athlete, a baseball player or something, what's it matter if you use a safety bar or camber bar or whatever? It doesn't. It's better like, what's the intended training effect? How do we get this? We might have to do it squatting, but, like, there's a million different ways to squat. But see, the problem can come into that. People be like, okay, let's do a goblet squat. You got a 65-pound kettlebell. It's a 360-pound lineman. That's not going to make that 360-pound lineman be able to have the training effect of why we're doing this. Well, we want higher ground contact forces so you can get off the line faster. Well, if you weigh 360, 350 and you're doing a 65-pound kettlebell, that's mobility at best. It's a waste of time at worst. So, you have to look at what's the intended training effect. But you can accomplish a lot with the safety bar, say.
Absolutely. Well, so number one, I'm in total agreement with you. I think that there are certain camps that feel like you're, like, less than, stellar if you can't use a straight bar. But I agree with you. It's like, what's it comes back to what's the goal. One thing that I wanted to touch on briefly, and then I want to
for sure
kind of start to wrap up, because I know, like, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I want to be mindful of the length. But so you kind of touched on, like, the goblet squat as an example, which I think could be a great, like, teaching tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if someone's really weak, obviously, then maybe that load is sufficient. But, and I know like we're like kind of in a different circle of people, so I'm not sure, you might be shielded to it better than me, but in that sports performance world, especially, there's like this whole like movement right now, like that powerlifting is bad, weightlifting is bad. You should be doing all this, like, you know, and I don't want to pick on anyone specifically, but there's a lot of like more like animal flow type stuff or body weight stuff, or like, you know, traditional weightlifting is kind of bad. It's kind of like the message that I'm seeing. It's going to hurt you. It's going to cause
It goes, but it is swinging back that way, it seems.
That's where it's kind of, so I'm just kind of,
but it kind of got, so like with like Jim Windler stuff and like
that
five,
was, yeah, the pendulum was over there.
That kind of gave it like, and then there's dinosaur training. So the kind of those things seem to kick in the nuts, because in the 90s it got like crazy bad for like weightlifting and powerlifting. 80s it was kind of like the thing, like you know, Auburn hires Kaz as a strength coach kind of deal. Then it goes back to people that like have never lifted weights that have a PhD. It goes back and forth of like any of this stuff, like, you know, what degree, what certification. Oh, you know, I don't have one. Great, we love you even better, because that's a bullshit. Then it comes back to like, if you know, if you don't have like the highest one, you're, you know, some meathead moron that needs to get people hurt. But I think you're right about that. I think I also think you know, people listening to this, you need to be open-minded. So like, so, you know, you came to a seminar, you obviously established. So like, you know, I'm the same way. I wouldn't, it doesn't like, it's not like, to me, I don't think it's like a blow to your ego. If anything, it's going to make you look better, because if and that's not the point to come to how you look, but it does, because you're actually open to learn. It's not, you know, but at the same time, I think people are crazy that are always changing their philosophy. I've known,
Yeah.
I don't want to pick on people either, because a lot of these people actually like them as people. If they wanted to like come over here and have a drink of beer or something, that'd be great. But like, you know, I do training a lot differently. Is I think like, you know, I'm trying, one guy that's pretty well known, no, he's not actually real well known, but he's got a pretty high position. And he was talking about, you know, a few years ago, like these pro athletes were just doing Mark Ripito starting strength. Okay. But then I'm like, because he invited me to come, it was interesting because he invited me to come watch. And one thing is, I mean, it was kind of a weird situation, because I don't think he invited me. I don't think I got a word in. It was supposed to be talking to me, but whatever. I wanted to see the place anyway, so it was good to go. It was fun. I actually like, I've already heard myself talk. I'd want to hear him anyways, but it was weird hearing him go from Mark Ripito, like bench, squat, and deadlift, and Dan John. He kind of did like a hybrid of those two, and then to like, you just need the basic lifts. All else is bullshit. You know, maybe you can do some pull-ups on the side, and that's that, to like basically doing like the sport with weighted vest. Say like if you're a, you know, baseball catcher, like have a freaking cable attached around you. There's a guy Metroplex, he just put cables around him, and catchers, you're fucking weird, dude. But guy was, it was classic. It was very funny, but nice guy too. I really actually liked him. But point being, like, if you go from like, oh yeah, we're gonna do like in your catcher gear with a cable, like going like this, to bench, squat, and deadlift, you don't do that, you're a pussy. Like, how do you go from that to that? That means you're not grounded, you have no philosophy. Now, if you tell me, like, for example, like you say, I do the goblet squat teacher, I'm like, that's for pussies. And you, okay, you got a new person to squat here. And I can see now, wow, you actually got that person to squat correctly, quickly, and I was having trouble. That's not like a major change in philosophy. It's okay, you got a better teaching tool. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to use it. We're all good, right? But if I said, like, you know, I train tactical athletes like powerlifters, and like next week, like bodybuilders, then next year, like, this is all bullshit. You only need bodyweight training. That's crazy. That means you've no philosophy, and you're just a leaf blowing in the wind. And then, you know, eventually, you know, and that's where the whole circle jerk kind of like comes in, of like people trying to, you know, that's why a lot of people have problems with some of the, you know, higher, you know, people that aren't self-employed, because they're just trying to like play a game and kiss ass. And, you know, I don't know how you want to live like that, first off. And second off, I don't know how you get people results, and people don't think you're crazy of like, oh, for football, let's push a car, fine, to like, no, let's just go do like, you know, yoga or something. Like, only, how do you go from there to there?
Yeah. So,
I mean, you know, you had nothing to start with, you had no like philosophical base.
Yeah, I think the flip-flopping is no good. And I know, like, really to kind of come full circle with myself, one of the reasons that I opened up my own company, and again, not to like talk bad of anyone, so it is what it is. But the guy that I was working for at the time, when I was just a personal trainer before I started my business in 2011.
Mhm.
So from like 2006 to like 2011,
Mhm.
I volunteered as a strength coach in my old high school. I was working for somebody else. I was coaching football and wrestling. And one of the things that I kind of recognized early on, I definitely had a powerlifting bias, but I also recognized that, like, I didn't train the right way. Like, I got very strong in the weight room. I was like a big weight room guy, and I wasn't like really explosive. I didn't do enough of like the plyos and that kind of stuff. But I did recognize that where I was successful, and a lot of the kids I started to coach there were some kids that were kind of scrawny. They needed to put on size, and they were just too weak. So there was a base level of strength that was required, and I found that a lot of kids, especially the wrestlers I worked with, they just needed just to do basic lifts because they were just tall, skinny, lanky guys, and they got a lot of benefit from deadlifting and doing pull-ups and things like that. And the guy that I was working for at the time, like, he would charge this crazy amount of money and do speed training, and he would have these kids like just be jumping over a jump rope, and I'm like, what is this really accomplishing? Is this really, you're kind of babysitting? So that was just something that always kind of stuck
Well,
with me.
I think it's because they sell the parents, like you get some
They want first step
just,
quickness or all these buzzwords.
well, you imagine like some well-to-do, mom that does like just like a personal training class for general fitness comes in there and you say, hey, guess what? If you get your deadlift up to 2.5 times your body weight, by default, you should be more explosive. And then once we get there, we have to really fine tune the speed. They're going to be like, no, you're just, especially like you, they'd be like, no, you're just a powerlifter. Like that's, you just want me, no, I don't. May have that bias there, but like there is a base level of strength versus you go, hey, like, look at like how fast. So there's a funny video. I don't remember who posted it, but it was a performance type of deal. And they were showing a ladder drill and basically showing how your hips or anything don't move. It's just your feet. Then they compare it side by side with a guy tap dancing and saying, like, is this guy going to jack you up on the football field? It's like the skinny dude, like doing a fast tap dance. And point being, like, I'm not like against ladders at all. I think they can, I think they can be good for like activation and stuff, but to say that's going to like a transfer to like an agility, we're actually having to fully cut and move your body the entirely different way instead of just your feet. There's no way it's going to transfer 1-to-1. You say, hey, that's a great way to like kind of warm up. Yeah, I mean, it's a good way to activate. Like I like to do them to myself just to warm up sometimes because the steps are so small and all that. You can get going pretty fast, quickly, get warmed up that way without doing like a big risk. Where if I just say I'm gonna go sprint in the backyard, well, that could be problematic, not warmed up. With the ladder, you kind of go get activated, feel good, and that kind of stuff, which is cool. But to say that's the same as like a running back's gonna cut is just not true. But it looks better maybe to sell it to a parent. And that's sort of from a business standpoint, that sort of was helpful for me. Like when I worked with a lot of high school athletes, was I was like the first one, at least around here. I know other people are doing it too, but like I one time went to I don't know the first one, but I went to Mark. I was in high school at UNLV for like a track meet or something, and I saw Mark Philippi was there, and he had tires and stuff. I don't know what he had the football players do. I don't know if it was for him or for the team. I didn't. He was nice. I got to talk to him, but like they were about to do something, so I was like ask him 3,000 questions. But I'm like watching this. I'm like, this to me is like what you really need. So this is going to be like you have your weights, then you have actually on the field practice and sprinting and stuff. Then this is our intermediary. And so where you're actually moving with weight, like I started doing that stuff with Ode Hagen, and it was crazy how athletic I was getting without doing a lot of athletic stuff, which before I trained, like I said, more like powerlifting, bodybuilding stuff. And but doing that here, no one else was doing it. So when all of a sudden I'm going to like a junkyard getting like tires and bringing over Metroflex and got farmers walks and stuff, it like kind of was that selling point to parents. Oh, this guy's like, I wasn't doing it for that reason because I thought that was the best way, but it did kind of help there. But I think a lot of times, people are looking to get entertained, but they want to think they're on it. Like if you say, hey, you know what, like to gain weight, you got to eat 500 calories over your baseline and X amount of protein and, drink a glass of milk a night. That's not very exciting. People don't think Well, I could have just read that on the internet. Yeah, you could have, but that's going to be a good strategy, say. And people want a lot of times is that's so when I'm training, working with people, I do try to keep it interesting for them there. If like, so for example, if we can get like a sled drag in there and get a similar training effect to some other, and you get like some rehab, prehab kind of benefits and strengthen their quads, they might think that's cooler than say a leg press. And if we can get this like a similar training effect by something they enjoy more and seems cool, that's great. Where other people might be like, dude, I'm not a strongman or whatever, and I want to do that, and we can find some other way to do it. So, but kind of went on a tangent there, but that's kind of been my experience.
No, I think that's well said. And I do think that like all this kind of circles back to like just kind of really just understanding who you're working with and kind of having and kind of learning them. Because yeah, there's definitely some people that work with that they may like never like want to see a band or a chain ever, and they're just happy just using the straight bar, and that's fine. Just and recognizing that they're maybe they're more of a certain person, where someone else might like a lot more variety, and maybe more of the traditional West Side stuff might jive a little bit better with them. And some people like they might want to have bigger arms, or they may want to do some strongman stuff. Just because I know like some of we have this moms group that trains at our New York gym, and for whatever reason, this one of the girls she just was infatuated with like the bamboo bar. So I'm like, sure. I'm like, you could do the,
yeah, exactly.
It's like she's just excited about it. And like, what is it going to help her bench? Like, it'll probably it'll help her stability, whatever. Is it like the most productive thing? Maybe, maybe not, but she's pumped to do it. Like she's been doing it once a week. She does it as like a secondary thing. It's not taking away from, and her bench is going up, whether that's a factor or not. But she's excited to train every week. And I think that's important, that you're looking forward to the training. So I think, yeah, that's a great point for sure.
Well, I think it's basically that when you look at needs analysis of somebody, what they need, then that's where people are going wrong. Is then like, so there's two parts. Is one, what's their preferences, assuming, and then at that point you got to be straight with them. Is this productive? Is it semi-productive? Like that's still okay, probably, unless they're going for a world record. Semi-productive is good, but then is it like counterproductive? Like, then that's not good. And then also, what equipment do they have access to? I mean, like if you tell me like, hey, you know what? I got a garage gym with like one barbell and a squat rack, and I kind of move in a park bench to bench press. Like, we're not going to have a whole lot of variety. I mean, that you got to either like get some new equipment or join a gym, because like that can be, a source of frustration if someone's like, I gotta have more variety, but they have a barbell. I've run into that a couple of times. I need some more. What are we gonna do here? Like
post stance, wide,
yeah, exactly.
3-second pause, 2-second pause.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Versus like, which can be fine if it's like, somebody young and stuff with no injuries or something, but like, if somebody's older and kind of beat up, like I just had somebody the other day that like, he's not older, but he's had some shoulder stuff going on. Finally got him to join a gym. He wanted to buy new equipment. I'm like, you're not saving money at your home gym. You're buying stuff all the time that you don't need. Like, just join a gym. He joined a gym, and all of a sudden he's like doing like, hammer strength inclines, and that felt okay. Like I put him, here's a battery of like different things you can test out there. Let me know. And all these different machines, like I haven't had a contraction like that in my chest for, because you, first off, you've never done this. Second off, you're always like kind of protecting that shoulder, whether you know it or not.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Josh. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, and we could always do a part 2 in the future if you're down.
For sure.
If you have like just maybe one piece of advice for maybe it's a newer lifter starting out, or maybe someone's getting ready for their first contest, they want to kind of be in the sport for a long time, any like kind of parting wisdom for them?
Yeah, let's go with the contest one. That's a good one. So I think, if you've been training for a contest, unless everything's haphazard, don't try and change stuff at the last meet. Like, don't add like new supplements. If like you eat fast food, like if you eat fast food every single day and that's all you do, don't go on a bodybuilder diet like a day or two out. Like just run with what you brung at that point, and then try to change those things. So, if you haven't been sleeping enough or something, and all of a sudden you got time off work and you sleep a couple extra hours from 5 to 8, that's going to be good. That's a pretty safe bet. But like if you start taking weird supplements he had never tried, or like, anything like, there are people that like, you say a pre-workout. I've never tried a pre-workout before. Okay, cool. Well, you might have a paradoxical reaction. It's very unlikely, but there are people they're actually like paradoxically react to caffeine, like they get more tired and stuff. And it's a very small percentage of people, but that could be a thing and you don't know. So like, I doubt the effect's going to be so good that it's worth the risk, because you could be very bad if not. So I would not try new stuff. Stick with your plan. Set your attempts. I wouldn't be worried about also cutting weight for your first meet unless you're going. Powerlifting's weird. There are people that do lift a ton of weight the first time out, and if like you're some freak that's gonna deadlift the junior world record at like 21 years old or something, and you gotta you weigh 279, you need to get to, fine, I'm with you. But like if that's that, like that 0.01%, don't cut weight for your first meet. Have your attempts pick ahead of time, that kind of stuff. Practice your commands ahead of time. Like just go in there ready. Like, we don't know if it's your first meet, if you're going to get the like 10. Some people, I have a guy just deadlifted, he's a strongman stuff. It's like 50 on an 18-inch deadlift. He just did 720. That would for sure, based on all his training, unless he gets something crazy happens, he is good for 800. He gets over a 10% carryover. We know that. He's done multiple contests. So that's a pretty safe bet. We don't know you necessarily. So you might be somebody that doesn't get that huge carryover all the time. So don't be going in there thinking like, my best elephant training is 500. I'm going to hit 550. I'm going to open up at 501. I mean, come on. Like, let's get a total on the board, go 9 for 9. The thing is, you're going to build that total by hitting your attempts. Even with elite lifters, statistically it shows that you're getting a better total if you make most of your attempts, or 8 for 9, 9 for 9. Even like, so if you think you sandbagged a couple percent on each lift, but you make them all, it's like, the total is like, what would be the word I'm looking for? The total is like almost like a love triangle, I guess, just kind of like it's one deal, it's one entity. You know what I mean? So like, are you going there? If all you care about is your bench PR, just do the bench meet. Don't do the total.
Yeah, I think people get really romantic about like, I want to hit like these individual numbers for each lift. And I think that seeing the bigger picture, like you said, and just kind of making your lifts. And if you're a few pounds off each lift, but you make all of them,
yeah,
that's a good day, And I know like for me, and I'm sure for you, like my best totals, it's really rare. I've never had a 9 for 9 day where I've PR'd everything, like, but it's my best total. So it's my, you know what I mean?
Yeah, my best
so
meet ever total wise was a 6 for 9. And I was so, it was like, wow, you got a huge PR that mean. I did, but I was so much stronger if like, so that way I usually like, what I used to do is my dad would come to my meets and we'd always go whatever I said. And he said average it because I'm more aggressive. He's more conservative. And it worked out pretty well that way. But that meet, I'm like, dude, I'm doing my thing today. Like you can stay here and cheer on or get out of the way. And it went 6 for 9. And like, now part of that was, in my defense, I did have something going on. And for some reason, my arm, I think that meet I bulked up so much, like my arms and stuff got so tight I couldn't properly supinate. So I was kind of holding on to the deadlift with a couple fingers. So I couldn't really like lock out as good as I normally would. And then I took the other one would be that meet I took too big of a squat too on the third attempt. And I was close to making it, but I'd say this, you want to be more aggressive as you go. So like
I say the same thing.
It's the worst thing in the world, as you know, I'm sure, to hit a huge squat where blood vessels are popped and all that, and you're wiped. I mean, once you guys get stronger and you've done this for a long time, literally like those grinder lifts can wipe you out for a couple weeks. And this is like, 23 years old kind of stuff of like, it's not like, if you're 70, it's going to happen. No, it's happened to you anytime. And it's the worst feeling in the world to like, even if you hit that. Honestly, I've missed big squats, and so they grab them. It's not that as big of a deal, but you grind one out. I mean, one of my best meets ever, I was set up for I went 3 for 3 on squat, 1 for 3 on bench, and then 1 for 3 on deads. I had to lower my opener just because that squat. I wish I got to say that video and post it sometime if I find it. It was 727 at the time, and I don't think I could hit 728.
Yeah,
It was all I had, literally.
I had a similar thing happen to me. So my best competition squat is 900, and like I had like a weird gap, and part of it was like, opening up your own business and relationship problems and drama and whatever and then being 340 pounds and 5'8" is probably not the healthiest as I know that you got but anyways, in like I squatted 850 like relatively like soon in my opinion, but getting from 850 to 9 for whatever reason, just I was so like fixated on squatting 900 that like when I finally got it, like it was just like I ended up bombing out on bench. Like it was just like, and it was like, so I got like the squat, but then like, I was so like I didn't throw up, but I almost like felt like I needed to throw up. So like it was like not even like physically, it was like emotionally draining. That
totally, it's central nervous system shit for sure.
So I think people like you don't like know like how you're like you might hit like, and this may not happen at your first meet, but at some point you might hit like this lifetime goal, and then it's like, you're like, and then like you said, weeks after you're kind of like what, like people talk about the post meet blues and stuff. I think that's just your nervous system is just like kind of like what happened.
Well, funny you said, because the last thing before I go here, so I gotta run here right now. But first time I hit 600 on bench at that meet, I did the videos online of my 600. It's so easy, dude. It should have been like an opener, everybody says, but I was so fixated on 600. Go to 611, which is like the most, if you watch it, I don't have the video, but it's the most absurd light thing if you watch 600. Like, why don't you like 650 kind of thing? I didn't have a snowball's chance in hell with 600, 611, just because I hit that goal. Yeah. And I was already like, at the after meet party at that point in my head, whether I knew it or not. So
awesome, man. Well, Josh, where can people find you if they want to inquire about
JoshStrength.com is my website. Instagram, Jailhouse Strong. Twitter and Facebook, I think, are Josh Strength. So I'm around. I'm easy to find.
If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Please share it if it helped you. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.